Here's a dramatic, reflective introduction inspired by the calm, introspective tone often associated with Keanu Reeves, without imitating or claiming to be him. Life has a strange way of changing everything in a single moment. One conversation, one phone call, one sentence can divide your world into two parts: the life you thought you had, and the life you suddenly realize is slipping away. I never imagined that I would sit across from a doctor, searching his face for hope, only to hear words that echoed louder than anything I had ever experienced. I don't have much time. In that instant, fear wasn't the first thing I felt. It was silence. A silence so deep that it forced me to look at every choice I had made, every person I had loved, every dream I had postponed, believing there would always be another tomorrow. But what if tomorrow isn't promised? What if the greatest lesson about living only appears when time itself becomes the most precious thing you have left? Today, I want to share what happened after that moment, because sometimes the end of certainty becomes the beginning of truth. The doctor looked at me for a long time before he spoke. His eyes carried something that words struggle to hold. I remember the quiet more than I remember the room. The machines were making their usual sounds. People were walking through the hallway as if it were just another ordinary day. Outside the window, the world continued without asking whether I was ready for what came next. Then, he finally said the words that changed everything. You don't have much time. It's strange how a single sentence can make years disappear. Suddenly, every plan I had carefully arranged for next month, next year, someday, became fragile. The future that once felt endless became a narrow road I could finally see the end of. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply sat there, staring at the floor, wondering how something so invisible could carry so much weight. For years, I believed life would always give me another morning, another chance to say what I meant, another opportunity to forgive someone, another weekend to visit my family, another birthday, another sunset. We live as though tomorrow has already signed a contract with us, but it never has. Tomorrow has always been a possibility, never a promise. As I walked out of the hospital, people passed by carrying coffee, talking on their phones, laughing with friends. Nothing around me had changed, yet everything inside me had. The same sky looked different, the same air felt different. Even the sound of my own footsteps reminded me that every step is borrowed, never owned. I started thinking about all the hours I had wasted, trying to impress people who never truly cared. How many nights had I stayed awake worrying about opinions that would never matter? How many mornings had I rushed through without noticing the warmth of sunlight on my face? I had spent so much of my life preparing to live that I had forgotten to actually live. Fear has a way of introducing itself quietly. It doesn't always arrive as panic. Sometimes it sits beside you in silence. It asks questions you don't know how to answer. Was I kind enough? Did I love enough? Did I forgive enough? Did I spend too much time chasing things that could never love me back? Those questions echoed louder than the doctor's voice ever could. Then I realized something unexpected. The diagnosis hadn't stolen my life in that moment. It had stolen my illusion. The illusion that time was unlimited. The illusion that I could postpone happiness until I achieved one more goal. The illusion that life begins after everything becomes perfect. The truth is, perfection never arrives. There is always another bill to pay, another problem to solve, another dream to chase. If we wait for life to become perfect before we appreciate it, we may spend our entire existence standing outside the door, never realizing it was already open. I remembered moments that once seemed insignificant, sitting beside someone I loved without saying a word, sharing a simple meal, watching rain fall against a window, listening to an old song while driving with no destination. Those moments never asked for applause. They never appeared in photographs that strangers admired. Yet they became the richest parts of my memory because they were real. Successes had once looked like reaching the top of a mountain. Now it looked like having enough strength to climb a small flight of stairs. Wealth had once meant owning more. Now it meant having one more morning to hear birds singing outside my window. Time had quietly replaced everything I thought was valuable, and for the first time I understood that every second is a form of wealth we spend without checking the balance. I stopped asking why this happened to me. Life rarely explains itself. Storms don't apologize before they arrive. Winter doesn't ask whether the trees are ready to lose their leaves. The ocean doesn't stop producing waves simply because one sailor is tired. Nature keeps moving, and somehow it invites us to move with it, instead of resisting every change that frightens us. Pain began teaching lessons that comfort never could. It stripped away every unnecessary layer until only truth remained. I saw clearly who stayed beside me without being asked. I noticed who called simply to hear my voice. I noticed who disappeared the moment life became inconvenient. Strange how difficulty introduces you to the people who were quietly loving you all along, while revealing those who only loved the version of you that never struggled. There was a time when I believed strength meant never breaking. I thought courage was measured by how well you could hide your pain, how quietly you could carry impossible weight without asking for help. But the days after hearing those words taught me something different. Real strength isn't pretending that nothing hurts. Real strength is waking up when your heart is heavy and choosing to keep moving anyway. It is allowing yourself to feel every emotion without letting those emotions become your prison. Every morning became an unexpected gift. I no longer opened my eyes with a list of complaints waiting for me. Instead, I listened. I listened to the silence before the world became loud. I listened to my own breathing, as if it were music I had ignored for years. I noticed the light entering through the curtains, slowly painting the room with another chance. The sunrise had always been there, but I had rarely been present enough to welcome it. I realized that most of us are not running out of life. We are running through it too fast. We rush from one obligation to another, believing that happiness is waiting at the finish line. We postpone joy until we earn enough money, until we find the perfect relationship, until our problems disappear, until someone finally tells us we are enough. But life keeps whispering the same truth. We are already standing inside the moments we are searching for. The hardest conversations were not with doctors. They were with myself. I had to face the person I had become after years of chasing expectations that were never truly mine. I had spent so much energy trying to become someone impressive that I had almost forgotten how to become someone peaceful. Those are two very different journeys. There were memories I couldn't stop revisiting, not because they were extraordinary, but because they were unfinished. A friend I never called back. A family member I assumed would always be there. An apology delayed because pride seemed more important than love. We convince ourselves that unfinished conversations can wait, but life has a habit of closing doors before we realize they were slowly swinging shut. One afternoon, I sat on a park bench and watched strangers pass by. Children laughed without worrying about tomorrow. An elderly couple walked slowly, saying very little, yet understanding each other completely. A young man carried flowers, probably on his way to surprise someone he loved. Everyone was carrying an invisible story. Some were celebrating, some were grieving, some were quietly surviving. It reminded me that we never truly know what another person is facing. Kindness is not just good manners. It may be the one thing keeping someone from giving up. I stopped measuring people by what they owned. Expensive clothes fade, beautiful houses grow old, cars become outdated, titles are eventually forgotten. But kindness has a strange way of surviving long after everything else disappears. Years from now, people may not remember the things you bought, but they will remember how safe they felt in your presence, how your words gave them hope when their own voice had become silent. There were evenings when fear returned without warning. It would sit beside me as darkness filled the room. It would remind me that no amount of positive thinking can erase uncertainty, and I learned not to fight it. Fear is part of being human. The goal isn't to eliminate it. The goal is to keep loving, keep laughing, keep living even while fear is sitting quietly in the corner. Something remarkable happened as I accepted that truth. The future stopped controlling me. I could no longer waste today worrying about possibilities that might never arrive. Every conversation became more honest. Every hug lasted a little longer. Every smile carried more meaning, because I understood that ordinary moments are only ordinary, until one day they become memories you would give anything to experience again. I discovered that gratitude is not pretending everything is perfect. Gratitude is finding light, even when the sky refuses to clear. It is appreciating the people who remain beside you when life becomes uncomfortable. It is recognizing that even a difficult day is still a day you were allowed to experience. That understanding changed the way I looked at every hour, every face, every heartbeat, every quiet moment that once seemed too small to matter. I used to believe that the most important question in life was, how much more can I accomplish? Now, a different question follows me everywhere I go. How deeply did I live while I was here? Those two questions sound similar, but they lead to completely different lives. One asks you to keep chasing, the other asks you to finally notice where you are standing. I began letting go of things I had carried for far too long, old arguments that no longer mattered, regrets that could never rewrite the past, expectations that belonged to other people instead of me. It was surprising how heavy invisible burdens could become. The moment I stopped holding on to them, I realized they had been stealing far more energy than the illness ever had. Forgiveness became less about the people who had hurt me and more about the life I still wanted to experience. Holding resentment felt like carrying stones in a backpack while trying to climb a mountain. Every step became harder, not because the road was impossible, but because I refused to put the weight down. Some people may never apologize. Some wounds may never receive an explanation. Waiting for perfect justice can quietly become another way of wasting the little time we have. There were days when my body felt weaker than my spirit, and days when my spirit struggled even more than my body. On those days, I learned that healing does not always mean becoming healthy again. Sometimes healing means making peace with the reality standing in front of you. It means refusing to let fear write the final chapter before life is finished telling its story. I started calling people simply to hear their voices, not because I needed anything from them, but because I realized that love grows stronger when it is spoken instead of assumed. Too many hearts spend years waiting to hear words that are never said. I'm proud of you. I forgive you. I miss you. I love you. These simple sentences often arrive too late because we keep believing there will always be another opportunity. One evening, I watched the sun disappear below the horizon. Years earlier, I would have glanced at it for only a few seconds before checking my phone or thinking about tomorrow's responsibilities. This time I stayed until the last light faded from the sky. I realized the sunset wasn't asking anyone to admire it. It simply completed its purpose with quiet grace. There is something beautiful about that. We don't always need applause to know our lives have meaning. I also stopped comparing my journey with anyone else's. Comparison is a thief that quietly steals gratitude. Someone will always have more success, more money, more recognition, or more comfort. But none of those things can measure the value of a human life. Every person carries battles that remain invisible to the world. Every smile may be hiding a storm. Every calm face may have survived countless sleepless nights. I found peace in ordinary routines, making a cup of coffee, reading a few pages of a book, sitting outside while the wind moved through the trees, listening without interrupting, smiling at strangers. These moments seemed too simple to matter before, yet they slowly became reminders that life has never been built from extraordinary events alone. It has always been built from thousands of quiet moments that most of us rush past without seeing. The strange thing about hearing that time may be limited is that it teaches you how limitless love can become. Love doesn't count the number of days remaining. It fills whatever days exist with honesty, patience, and presence. It reminds you that the greatest legacy is rarely something you leave behind in a bank account or a trophy case. It is the peace you leave inside the hearts of the people who knew you. As the days continued, I became less interested in controlling everything around me. Life has never been something we completely control. We only borrow moments from it. We borrow conversations. We borrow sunsets. We borrow laughter. We borrow time with the people we love. Perhaps the greatest act of wisdom is not pretending those moments belong to us forever, but treating each one as the quiet miracle it has always been.